My son said, "My father-in-law kicked me out, saying my bloodline wasn't worthy." What I did next in Bryant Park, I found my son sitting on a bench with 3 suitcases, everything he owned, and my 4-year-old grandson, Mason. "Why aren't you at the office?" I asked. Nathan looked down, defeat etched into his face. "I was fired this morning. My father-in-law told me, 'Our blood doesn't belong with people like you.'" I didn't yell. I didn't even frown. Instead, I smiled, not with joy, but with the cold precision of a predator. "Get in the car," I said. Tonight, that man was about to learn who truly owned the board he thought he controlled. It was a Thursday afternoon in October. Nathan sat hunched over, his shoulders curved inward. Beside him, Mason was kicking at fallen leaves, his light-up sneakers flashing in the autumn sun. Nathan didn't look up until my shadow fell across him. His eyes were red, exhausted and broken. "Grandpa, can you fix this?" Mason asked, grabbing my hand. I turned to my son. "Why aren't you at the office?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "Charles fired me. He said our blood doesn't belong with theirs." Those words hung in the cold air. For 3 years, I had sat through Sunday dinners watching Charles Pennington lecture us on the difference between old money and new. I had catalogued every insult, every condescending remark. But this was a line crossed. "Victoria changed the locks," Nathan's voice cracked. "She put my things on the sidewalk while I was being fired. Said her father made the right call." I knelt to Mason's level. "I can fix it, buddy. I promise." I picked up the suitcases and signaled to Frank, my head of security, to help Nathan. As we drove north, I watched them in the rearview mirror. My son looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "I built Sullivan Maritime over 30 years, I said quietly. "Started with 1 truck. We do 800 million a year now." Nathan knew the history, but he needed to hear it. 3 years ago, I bought Hudson Freight for $20 million through an offshore shell company to keep the owner hidden. I put Charles in charge as CEO. Nathan's eyes sharpened in the mirror. "You came to me back then and said you wanted respect for who you are, not whose son you are," I continued. "I agreed not to interfere. I watched you endure things that would have broken most men while Charles explained why you were insufficient. I said nothing because we had a deal. But Charles doesn't know something. Hudson Freight doesn't belong to him. It never did. Every paycheck he signed, every insult he hurled. He's been working for me the entire time." Silence filled the car. "You've owned it all along?" Nathan whispered. "Why put me through that?" "Because you asked me to. You needed to know you could stand alone." I met his eyes in the glass. "But that deal died the moment I saw you on that bench." As the iron gates of my Bedford estate appeared, Nathan asked, "What are you going to do?" I gave him the smile I usually save for closing deals that leave the other side with nothing. Charles wanted to play games with bloodlines. Now, he's going to learn that in my world, bloodlines mean nothing. Only power matters, and he just picked a fight with the wrong family. For 3 years, I had swallowed insults along with expensive wine, quietly collecting ammunition. Every Sunday at the Pennington estate in Greenwich was a ritual of humiliation. Charles would reposition Nathan's wine glass by 2 inches, sneering about breeding. Victoria never defended her husband. She just scrolled through her phone. I had observed it all. I noticed when Hudson Freight's reports started arriving late. I noticed when Victoria stopped answering my calls. But the final red flag was a week ago, when Nathan visited my office looking gaunt. I noticed his wrist. The $50,000 platinum Rolex I gave him for his 30th birthday was missing. He lied and said the clasp was loose. I knew better. He had pawned it. The moment he left, I called Frank Morrison. "Audit Hudson Freight." every transaction for the last 6 months, and find out what's happening at that house. Quietly. 24 hours later, Frank walked into my study with a black folder. In my world, a black folder means immediate action. "You need to see this, Mr. Sullivan," Frank said, opening the file. The first page was a police report filed at 1:15 p.m., just hours after Nathan was terminated. The complainant was Charles Pennington. The allegation? That Nathan had stolen $2.8 million worth of family heirlooms, antique coins, and jewelry. "He filed this while Nathan was still sitting on that park bench," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Yes, sir," Frank replied. "He wanted him arrested before he could even try to defend himself." Charles Pennington thought he was playing a masterstroke. He had no idea that the man he was trying to destroy didn't just have a seat at the table. He owned the room. The reckoning had begun. The second page of the folder made my jaw tighten. It was a credit report detailing 12 separate loans from different banks, all taken out over the last 6 months. Totaling $18 million, every single one was in Nathan's name, except the signatures were fakes. "Handwriting experts confirmed it," Frank said, sliding a document across the desk. "High-quality digital forgeries." They lifted Nathan's actual signature from company documents and plotted them onto loan applications. The collateral agreements listed Hudson Freight as the guarantor and Nathan's personal assets as secondary security. When these loans inevitably defaulted, the banks would dismantle Nathan's life. He would be personally liable for $18 million he never borrowed. They were building a trap, I realized aloud. Bankrupt the company, blame Nathan, and let the criminal charges follow. He goes to prison while they walk away clean. "That's our assessment, sir," Frank replied. He pulled out a tablet and pressed play. The video showed Nathan and Victoria's bedroom, captured by a hidden camera. Victoria's voice was sweet, but laced with poison. "You're so tense lately, Nathan. You're becoming aggressive. You're scaring Mason." "I'm not aggressive, Victoria. I'm just tired. See? You're yelling. You're unstable." The video cut to another clip of Victoria breaking a vase, then immediately crying out, "Why did you do that? Mason, go to your room. Daddy's having another episode." "She was building a custody case," Frank explained. "These videos were meant for a judge, proof that Nathan was a dangerous, mentally unstable father. She wanted full custody, leaving Nathan with supervised visitation at best." I closed my eyes, fighting back the cold fury. "One more thing," Frank said quietly. "The worst part." He laid down a document I recognized instantly. My international shipping license. It was the authorization for Sullivan Maritime to operate in every major eastern seaboard port, contracts worth $400 million annually. They had pledged it as collateral for a $7.5 million loan from a Cayman Islands fund. "Block that transfer," I commanded. "Federal Reserve, Treasury Department, whoever you need. That money does not move." "Understood." "And Frank? Get me everything on Charles Pennington. Every loan, every account, every secret." Through the window, I could hear Nathan in the next room, reading Mason a bedtime story. My grandson's sleepy laughter drifted through the air. They had tried to take that away. Charles and Victoria had made a critical miscalculation. They thought I was just a wealthy old man who would sit by while they destroyed my son. They were about to learn the difference between having money and having power. Predators hunt at night. So do I. At 8 p.m. that evening, I stood in the shadows of Christie's showroom at Rockefeller Center. Charles Pennington moved through the crowd as if he owned the room. He didn't. He stopped near a Basquiat sketch, checking his phone nervously. A man in a leather jacket and a gold Rolex approached him, Tony Russo. Frank had flagged him months ago for container theft and off-the-books shipping deals. "Target confirmed," Frank's voice crackled in my earpiece. Russo didn't shake Charles's hand. Instead, he slid a USB drive across a marble pedestal. 10 units, Russo said quietly. Mercedes Actros 2023 models. Clean titles. Offshore registration. 85,000 each. My jaw tightened. That was 30% of market value. They were moving nearly $1 million in stolen trucks using my infrastructure. Tomorrow morning, Port of Newark, Pier 47. Cash on delivery, Charles said. Half up front, Russo countered. Or the deal's off. Charles hesitated, then nodded. Fine. I'll wire it tonight. From 15 feet away, I captured 3 clear photos. The handoff, Russo's face, and Charles clutching the USB. Friday afternoon, I met Victoria at MoMA. She arrived wearing oversized sunglasses and a theatrical air of grief. "This has been so difficult," she sighed, dabbing at dry eyes. "Nathan's behavior. I never imagined he'd become so unstable." I stayed silent, watching her mask slip. "I want this resolved quietly," she continued. "For Mason's sake. Sign the Tribeca penthouse over to me, and I'll withdraw the charges. Nathan can go free." "That's my home," I said, injecting a hint of fake fear into my voice. "It's all I have left." "Then you'll lose your son, too," she snapped, sliding a document across the table. "This is a donation agreement. No lawyers, no records. You have until 10 a.m. tomorrow." She walked away, her heels clicking against the marble. She thought she had already won. "Got every word," Frank said through my earpiece. "Extortion, coercion, and conspiracy." I pulled out my phone and called my contact at Manhattan Capital. "Buy every debt Charles Pennington has. By tomorrow morning, I want to own his life." Saturday morning, I sat on the 47th floor of Manhattan Capital. "Purchasing distressed debt in this volume is highly unusual," James Thornton noted, adjusting his glasses. "The risk is mine," I replied. "This isn't an investment. It's a tool." I signed the contracts one by one. The $3.2 million Greenwich mortgage, the $480,000 in vehicle loans, Victoria's $200,000 in credit card debt, and finally, the $12 million business line for Hudson Freight. "Mr. Sullivan, what exactly are you planning?" James asked. "Justice." By noon, I had frozen every account tied to Charles Pennington. By 2 p.m., Frank reported that the Cayman transfer had been flagged for money laundering and frozen by the Federal Reserve. My international license was safe. By 5 p.m., I stood in a private suite at the plaza, looking down at Fifth Avenue. The pieces were all in place. It was time for the final move. There was one more place I needed to go, back to the park bench in Manhattan where everything had changed. I sat there again, not as a warrior this time, but as a grandfather. The autumn leaves were the same, but the man on the bench was different, lighter, freer, and finally at peace. There were no suitcases today, no desperation. Instead, there was Mason, chasing pigeons across the plaza with his arms stretched wide like wings, his laughter ringing out as clear as a bell. I poured coffee from a stainless steel thermos, simple and practical. I realized then that I had finally escaped the iron mask I'd worn for 30 years. The mask of the empire builder, the strategist who turned shipping routes into fortunes, was gone. I hadn't just saved my son, I had given him something more lasting than a balance sheet, a legacy of dignity. Charles Pennington believed lineage was everything. Breeding, bloodlines, and the right name on the right documents. He was wrong. Character, loyalty, and love are the only things that matter, and those cannot be inherited. They must be earned. I spent 30 years building an $800 million operation, but it took only 2 weeks to build a complete family. A memory surfaced, unbidden. Nathan at 7 years old, standing in my study in his Little League uniform. "Dad, will you come to my game? I'm pitching." I hadn't even looked up from my contract. Not today, son. Maybe next time. There were so many next times, and I had missed every single one. I couldn't get those years back, but I could fix the mistake now, one generation at a time. Grandpa! Mason came running, his face flushed and happy, clutching a rubber ball. Watch this. He wound up like a major league pitcher and threw. The ball sailed toward me in a wobbly arc, and I caught it cleanly. Good throw, champ, I said, standing up. Want to practice some more? Yes. Dad said you'd teach me baseball. I smiled, a real smile, not the calculated expression I used in boardrooms. We spent the next 20 minutes throwing the ball back and forth. He missed more than he caught, but he laughed every time, and that mattered more than accuracy. As the sunset painted Bryant Park in shades of orange and red, I held out my hand. Come on, Mason. Let's go home. Your dad is waiting. His small fingers wrapped around mine, warm and trusting. We walked across the plaza, past the tourists and the chess players. At the edge of the park, I looked back one last time at that bench. It was where my son had sat believing he'd lost everything. It was where I decided that family and love were worth going to war for. It was where the healing finally began. Looking back, I have one piece of advice. Don't be like me. Don't wait 30 years to build an empire before you build a family. Don't let pride make you send your son into a den of wolves just to prove he can stand alone. I thought I was teaching Nathan strength, but I almost lost him entirely. Compelling stories are often about revenge and corporate warfare, but the best stories are about being there for bedtime. They're about answering when a small voice asks, "Grandpa, can you fix this?" I was given 3 chances I didn't deserve. First, my son was preserved when I failed to protect him. Second, I had the resources to fight back. And third, I was given Mason, a reminder that legacy isn't measured in revenue, but in relationships. The scripture asks, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul?" I gained Sullivan Maritime, but I nearly lost my soul. If you're facing betrayal, remember that justice and dignity matter. But don't let the fight consume you so completely that you forget what you're fighting for. We aren't here to destroy our enemies. We are here to love our families and pass down something better than wealth. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's living well, loving deeply, and finally coming home. Mason is waiting for me now. We have baseball to practice. Thank you for listening to An Old Man's Story. This narrative contains dramatized elements for educational purposes, but the core lessons about family and loyalty remain true. If you found value in this journey, please share your thoughts below.